Good morning, my name is Hans Schut and I'm the author of Dubov's Explosive Italian. This morning I will present to you the 10 most common review mistakes in spaced repetition in all the variations of Dubov's Explosive Italian. I hope by doing so that it will be easier for you to memorize the moves and the variations, and that it creates logic and a storyline that will help you. Also, in my own study of this mini course, I use tabiyas, and I will show you how I memorize the lines based on final positions and then backtracking to the moves that have to be played to reach that position. So here you can see the top 10 of review mistakes in the variations of Dubov's Explosive Italian across all students. So on top we have almost 5,000 attempts and 1,200 mistakes with an accuracy of 75%. You can see the move that should be played is b5, and the students played f takes g7 or castle short. I combined the common lines, the positions that stem from one variation, into one to make the video shorter, and we will switch now to Chessbase and go through those 10 most common mistakes. So let me first explain what I mean with tabiya, as I mentioned in my introduction. So this is the first variation in the mini course. And d3 is also most commonly played. And let's just go to the end of the line. And so this is the position that I have in my mind. This is what I call a tabiya, an opening reached by more or less standard moves, which is the starting point for various alternative moves or serious investigation. So this is my target, my end state that I want to achieve, and this is what I have in my head. So I know that the rook on g8 is very passive, the knight on a5 is out of play, the king on d7 is in danger. Sometimes in some lines the queen on d5 is in danger. And my moves consist of moves like knight d2, rook e1, knight e4, knight f6, bishop f6, and sometimes h4, supporting the pawn on g7 in the future with h5, h6. So this is for me the tabiya, and I know that when I play this line, I have to reach this. So somehow my moves that I choose have to fit into this structure. And that's for me a major help in memorizing opening lines. And there are, for me, 5 to 10 tabiyas in the Dubov, and that helped me tremendously in increasing my accuracy. So let me go back and to the start of the line. So this is the first position that is in the top 10. And what is very important to notice here is that the pawn on f6 covers the square e7. So the knight cannot go there and the queen cannot go there. So for most players they will say, but the pawn is going to take on g7, so why does it matter? Well, we see it in our course. We have to play queen e2, and we know the queen is going to e4 and then to h7. And that's the move in the course. But some students play f takes g7, allowing queen e7. And now we see immediately why this move is incorrect and black is better. Because how is the king going to f1? Do we have to trade queens? All our initiative is gone, and we will never reach the tabiya position. So queen e7 is the refutation of taking on g7. The second played move is b5, and this looks actually quite logical, because you can say, why does it matter, the move order b5 or queen e2? Well, black has a very surprising move, which is castle. So it looks like a sack of a piece, which it is, but the king is not safe, and the rook is entering the position, and the bishop on b6 is attacking f2, and the rook on e2 is attacking f2. White can interpose, but black has a crushing attack after the trades. So after b5, very surprising castle, followed by rook e8. And after f takes g7, queen e7, check, and we cannot achieve our tabiyas position that we're striving for. Let's move on. So in the course we go queen e2, black interposes, and now again the question is, how do we continue? We remembered from the previous position that the pawn on f6 is very crucial in blocking the knight going to g7. So if you would play in this position, f takes g7, rook g8, b5, then black plays d3, queen e4, and knight e7. And knight e7 defends the rook on g8. Black can play in the future queen d7 or queen d5, castle long, and we lost our initiative. So it's very crucial that we don't allow this knight to go to e7, defending the rook and also blocking a potential g5, d8 attack. Of course, when we go back to this position, it's very crucial that we maintain our pawn. When we go to our tabiyas, we know that this pawn is on g7 and completely keeping the rook on g8 out of play. So if we would just casually castle here, the queen takes and we lose our crucial pawn. So this was the second position out of the top 10 with this line. Let's move forward. So b5. Now, of course, there are two moves, d3 and knight a5. We will come back on knight a5 in the next line. We go to this one. It makes for a lot of black players sense just to create a passed pawn and keep the pawn on the board. Queen e4, knight a5 takes, and rook g8. Again, it is white cannot lose the pawn on g7, and we cannot allow black to castle on. So when you think about the tabiyas position, we know the king is on d7, and the queen is on d5, and the queen is on h7, and the bishop is on g5. So when we think about it, if we would play queen h7 directly here, black can go f6, castle, queen d7, bishop h6, because the pawn on g7 was under attack, and after a long castle, suddenly black has connected their rooks and is very safe and is having an equal position. Another move that is played in this position is castle, but then we lose immediately our pawn, which we cannot allow. So just like we had in the previous example, after castle queen f6, here castle rook takes g7, we lose our asset, the advanced pawn on g7. So now we know that after rook g8, we have to continue with bishop g5, preventing long castling, and that is very crucial here. Queen d5, and now we take, and after king d7, we castle long. One more, we castle short. One more thing, when we just go back and we say, why do we castle short? This has come up in games of my students. So if you're here, king d7, why not play knight d2? Well, the king has not castled, and after bishop f5, queen h6, the king can be attacked again with rook e8, and the rook is coming to e2 again. So it's very important that this that the king gets into safety immediately. So this was the first position. Let's go to the next position. So this is the same line with bishop b6, but now instead of d3, black plays knight a5. We take on g7, rook g8, and now, of course, the question is, how do you memorize this? Well, the way I memorize it is that I say, I'm going to take on d4 because I know the final position. And the final position occurs, so this is my tabiya that I have in my head. So I know I have the bishop on f6, defending the pawn on g7 and preventing black from long castling. So this is what I want to achieve. The rook again on g8 is a bad piece. I don't know where this queen is going and how this will continue, but I know that I want to achieve this. And it's surprising for many black players that there's no trade on d3. But the priority is not allowing black to castle long. And also, if you take on d3, you free the knight to go to c4. So we are not volunteering to trade the queens. So this is the position, and there are several lines how this can continue. But this is for me the tabiya that I have in my head that I want to achieve. So the bishop on f6, and I know I want to tempt black to take on d4, and then after bishop b2, my bishop can go to f6. So when I go back to this position, I say, okay, I want to play knight takes d4, attacking the bishop on e6, and it seems for black logical to take on d4 because knight e6 is threatening, followed by queen h5 check. So knight takes e6, f takes e6, queen h5 check. So that's because I want to tempt the opponent to get into that line. I will not be tempted, and I know that this bishop will go from b2 to f6. I will not play bishop g5, queen d5, bishop f6, d3, and now queen e5 takes, knight takes, and black frees themselves with the move a6, threatening to take on b5, and if white takes on a6, there's rook takes a6, and suddenly we see the pin of the rook on a6 looking at the rook on a1, and knight b3 is a major threat, and black is better. So let's return to this position. If I castle again, black plays queen f6. Now if we take, the bishop takes, the queen takes on g7, and threatening to take on d4, threatening to take on g2 with mate, and I again lost my initiative. So that's why in this position, the move to get to the tabiya position after bishop b2, bishop f6, is knight takes d4 with the threat knight takes e6, f takes e6, queen h5. Okay, let's go to the next position. Again, we have the line with bishop b6, e5, queen e2, and now the weak move, king f8. We push again, and after d3, our queen goes to a4, and the knight goes to a5. So the move in this line, in the course, is queen e5, increasing the tension, and also with the immediate threat of queen takes f6, bishop a3, queen e8 checkmate. So that is why this pawn cannot be taken. And if the pawn gets taken by g takes f6, there also follows mate. So the pawn on f6 is safe. And so the best that black can do is play g6, But then if we look to the final position in the course, we can see the weakness of the back rank. The king on g8 is in a bad position, and the rook on g8 is completely out of play. So let's go back at what the students of the course. So we are here. We saw queen e5 is increasing the tension and threatening mate. So, and besides threatening mate, of course, also the threat is f takes g7, winning the rook on h8. So if we would not play queen e5 increasing the tension, but we play it a little bit slower with castle, now black can make a little hole, some space for his king, and let's see what the difference is. Suddenly the king can escape. So h6, I mean, it prevents also moves like bishop g5 and queen g5, makes all the difference. And that's giving the advantage, the major advantage that white has away. The other move, which is very surprising and looks very logical, is bishop a3 check. And white has actually a forced win after king g8. Bishop e7, attacking the queen, queen d7, take, king takes, queen e5 check, king g8, queen g5, checkmate. So this is, so in this position, yes, queen e5 checkmate. So it looks actually like a very strong move. After king g8, there's either you win the queen or there's a forced checkmate. But black has the surprising c5. You say, what does it change? Because I can take en passant. King g8, bishop e7, but now there's queen c7, and queen c7 defends the square e5, and black was using that to create, white was using that to create a mating attack on the black. So that is how this is covered, and suddenly we don't have a crushing attack anymore, and the game continues. So we have to play queen e5, leading to a completely winning position. Let's go to the next position. b4, bishop b6, e5, and now queen e7. And in the course I call this a one-trick pony, because queens can be chased, after castle, the pin on e5 is gone. The knight has to move, and we can chase the queen with bishop g5. And that's the idea in the course, that we chase the queen. The queen doesn't have a lot of squares, can only go to f8 or interpose with f6, but then we open up the e-file. So that looks very strong. So in the course, this is how it continues, with a winning position. Interposing on e5, we take with the knight, and then we take c takes d4, and we win the game. So what are the alternatives that students are playing in this line? So after knight g4, now bishop g4. So of course the knights are attacking the pawn on e5. So if we are just complacent and we play h3, we lose this pawn. And you might say yes, but the e-file will become available after the knight moves. But black has queen h4, and after d takes e5, the queen takes on c4, and also the queen h4 threatens to take on d4 because it's under attack by bishop b6 and by the queen on h4. So suddenly the advantage is gone. There's one more continuation, which is also pretty good. So we go back here, and so the line in the book is to chase the queen with bishop g5. Queens that come out early in the game have to be chased. But there's also c takes d4. Then the queen can take the pawn on b4 and attack the bishop on c4. And now we cannot play, we would like to play something like bishop a3, but we have to defend the bishop. And this position is +2 for white. So it's a good position. But let's return. So this is +2. So I'm still very good. But let's return to our line and say that the queen goes to f8. Then we take, and we get the same position, but instead with the bishop on c1, the bishop is on g5, and this position is +3. So we have a free move, bishop g5, activating the bishop, and it leads to a position which is +3 instead of +2. Okay, now we get to a very difficult line. So again, we have bishop b6, e5, and now no d5, but knight g4. And so if I look to the tabia, so if I think bishop b6, knight g4, I think about, okay, this is the line with the crazy sacrifice by black of the knight on d4, queen h4 coming, and then I win the piece back, so he sacrificed another piece, and then I lose in the end my rook on a1, and there's a knight on a3, and I have compensation. So let me show you. So that's what's going through my mind. So I bishop b6 and knight g4, and in our course, this is the crazy line. And I know after bishop takes a1, queen takes a1, we have reached the tabia. That is the start. And we know that white is better, but it's very unbalanced because I've given up. I've given up an exchange, and black can actually take another pawn. And this is all analyzed in the course. And the initiative, I also show how you can build the initiative. But a lot of players will say, this is probably one of the lines I don't feel comfortable with. It's like, how does my activity compensate for my material deficit, and how do I build this attack? And that's explored in the course. But when you think about tabia, I think about this position. So I know that this is the position in the course, and I know that there is this crazy knight takes d4, and there's this crazy knight takes h2, and I have to include this little move bishop g3 to also in the line. So this is what I have in my head. You can say, yeah, that makes it easy, but this is this is like the tabia that I have in my head. This is where it starts for me. After knight a3, I know the bishop is going to take on a1, and then I have a better position, but it's very unbalanced, and I have to make something out of my activity. So let's return, because there are three, this is a difficult line, and there are three positions that we have to discuss. So knight g4. So here we are, and black has a lot of tactics, and those tactics are have to do with taking on d4 with the knight, or and activating the queen, attacks on f2, and the rook on a1. So we castle here, because if we play c takes d4, there's immediately knight takes d4. So again, a full sack of a piece, d5, attacking the bishop. We could take en passant. You would say, what's going on? Black castles, white castles, queen takes d6. So let's see what's going on here. This is given in the position. So the queen on d6 is attacking the pawn on h2, attacking the knight on d4. And you could say, yes, but I can just move my knight away. But then black takes with the bishop on f2, and the rook on f1 cannot take the bishop, because then the queen on d1 is undefended. So king h1, black trades the queens, And now knight f2 is a threat. And the best that white can do is get into a perpetual, because he cannot lose this rook. And there's this threat of knight f2 winning the rook. So this is a completely equal position leading to a perpetual. So what we saw in our main line after castle is happening here, but more violently, that black can sacrifice a knight on d4. And it's very surprising that this works. And opening up the position and then just castling, like we also saw on this b5 line in the line where we played b5 in the main line in the first variation. But you can see how fast black mobilizes the pieces, and you can see this attack on d4, on f2 and h2 coming into play. After bishop g5, f6, we can see again our king is not in safety, and there's a check by black, which is very inconvenient. Black interposes and now threatens to play knight d3, and the queen cannot take because the queen is pinned by the queen on e7. So that's also a bad line. So it's very important to bring this in this line, to bring the king into safety. And of course b5, we just take here, and there's no rook e1 or something like that to pin the knight on e5, because we haven't castled yet. So also by castling we bring this rook e1 in the position. So this is the first position. So knight g4 we have to castle, because if we take on d4, there's this amazing knight takes d4. Castle. Black castles, and now the pawn on e5 is under attack. So if we would play b5, the knight takes. If we play h3, the knight takes. And there's no king on e8, so rook e1 is no longer a pin. So we have to defend this pawn, and that's why in the course we play c takes d5. You could say, why not bishop g5? The queen goes here. And again, knight takes d4. So we see this theme coming back again and again. Knight takes d4. And now there's queen e5 again. And again, the mating threat is on h2. The threat is to take on d4. And also the rook on a1 is hanging. And the bishop on g5 is under attack. So white can take on g4. But after bishop takes d4, it is actually... it is black who is better. So the theme of knight takes d4 keeps coming back. And so we have to be careful in this line, because it's very dynamic for the opponent. So finally, right, so we continue to the third position in this line. C takes d4. And now d5. And so in this position there are three other moves. Let's take the first one that is simple. E takes d6 just releases the tension. Queen takes d6. Let's also look at this position, right? So in this position the threat of white is to play h3, and then after knight h6 to take the bishop with the bishop on h6 and damage the pawn structure of black. So h3, knight h6, bishop takes h6, and then we can start the attack on the black king. So taking en passant releases the tension, and after queen takes d6, the queen is looking to h2. So there might be potentially knight takes d4, trying to get rid of the knight on f3 and threatening mate again. The pawn on b4 has been weakened. The bishop on c4 is under attack. So this is better for slightly better for black. After b5 again, of course now the bishop on c4 is under attack, and the knight on c6 is under attack. So black, just as a desperado, takes the piece and takes on c4. And if we look now, we have the knight on d4 is under attack by the queen and the bishop. And after knight f3, there's bishop f2 again, because this rook on f1 cannot go take on f2, because then the queen on d1 would be hanging. So again, there's this tactic of knight takes d4. We see it coming back again and again in this line, but in this case, of course, it is a bit of a blunder, because the bishop on c4 is under attack, and you're just demolishing the pawn structures on d4 and e5. Bishop d3 is interesting, f6. So it's threatening to take on e5 and then to push e5 to e4. So let's say that black takes. You can see now what happens. The knight takes again on d4. We have seen it again and again. And black doesn't even take back because of the rook on a1. So we see coming back queen h4 with a threat on h2, queen, and the pin on the knight on d4 to the rook on a1, and also the vulnerability of f2. Now you can see, like, bishop e3 seems to hold everything together a bit, but then there's queen e5, and there's the threat of mate on h2, knight takes e3. And after knight takes e3, black takes with check, and then collects the knight on d4. So f6 is a way to open the position. So very tricky. So we have to go to b3, knight takes d4, and then remember where we want to end up. Our tabia with the knight on a3, and after bishop takes a1 with more than sufficient compensation in the activity and the two bishops. And I've shown in the course how to build your attack. Okay, so this time we're going to the bishop e7 line, e5, and knight e5. So the course line is b5. So I saw that actually on Lichess, the most played is knight d5. That's of course the reason is that that's the move that we play after bishop b6. So in this line, if in this position, we play bishop d5. And why is that? Because in the future, we know that there is bishop g5. And now we get into the game of Dubov and Karjakin. So this is what, of course, what many of you have in their head. But now the bishop is on e7, and what is the difference after e5, knight e4? There is in the future no bishop g5 attacking the queen, and there's no forced knight e7. So that is why knight d5 take, and now there's no real follow-up. There's no bishop g5. So bishop b6, the bishop has left the diagonal of f8 to b4, so we can attack the queen, which is a bit vulnerable with bishop g5, and we have all kind of future plans. The bishop retreats to e7, there's no follow-up like that, so we have to find a different way. So to conclude, in this line, we don't play bishop d5, because the bishop is on e7 and we don't have a future bishop g5. Also, the way I remember it is because of the tactic that is in the position after this line. So this is for me the tabia that I use to recall this. So when the bishop is on e7 and the knight goes to e4, I know I have to reach this position potentially. Of course, black doesn't have to fall for this double attack. But this is what I have in my head as a memory marker. So we are here. And I think, how do I get to this position where I have a queen on a4, a bishop on d3, and a queen on e4? And what is the right move order? And I know if I push, if I play bishop d3 or bishop d5, I will not reach that position. So I know that I have to find the right move order, play b5, knight a5, bishop d3, and queen a4. This is the way to reach it. Also, we saw that after c takes d4 or after castle, d5 was an important move. So also in my head, there's this reference that after b5, d5, there's a puzzle in the course which wins a piece with queen a4. So here, there are two memory markers. One is to get to this position. The other one is to say, okay, after b5, there are two moves, knight a5, then I get to my tabia. But if black plays d5, I get to the puzzle in the course and I win a piece after queen a4 check. Thank you for your attention. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. I can do the same for the puzzles. If you're interested, let me know if you think it helps you and how you would like future videos to be. Thank you for your attention and have a nice day.